and welcome to another episode of FooBar. Today, I want to talk about sharing code between Lambda functions. When we talk about Lambda functions, I'm pretty sure you have heard that you should make your Lambda small, you should make them do one thing and one thing only, you should not build a monolith within a Lambda function, and then you follow that advice and you start working on your tiny whiny Lambda functions, and you realize that there is code that gets repeated over and over again in your functions. And you start wondering, should I copy paste this code? How I can reutilize the code so I can do things like connecting to a Dynamo table, or doing operations into Dynamo, or sending events in EventBridge, or using some business logic that you have, like some validation or something specific for your application, or even connecting to third-party dependencies that you need some specific version and you need to do something about them. So the easiest way to do this is to use Lambda Layers. So Lambda Layers allows you to package all this code externally in a nice little package that has a different lifecycle from your Lambda function, and then you can use them in multiple Lambda functions. This works not only for your code that you want to share around, as well for third-party dependencies. So imagine that you want to use Moment.js and you want to use a specific version of Moment.js. So in order to make sure that all your functions are using the exact version, you can wrap this inside the layer, and then all your functions will use the layer. So in this video, I want to talk about Lambda Layers, what they are, how to use it with third-party dependencies, and also how to use it with your own exclusive code. Because there is a lot of demos when you look for Lambda Layers on how to wrap a third-party dependency, but they don't show you how you can reutilize your code. And that's the most interesting part, in my opinion, because I don't like to rewrite my code over and over again. So let's start with what is a Lambda layer. A Lambda layer is a zip file. Yeah, that's it. Let's go. And these zip files contains your libraries, your custom runtimes, data, configuration file, whatever you want to put inside it. Layers, as I said before, they have an independent life cycle than your functions, so they are separated. So you will need to have some things in mind. For example, if you're working with third-party layers or even with your own layers, you need to deploy them in the exact same region as your functions. So if you're using Ireland, your layer should be deployed in Ireland. And if you're using third-party layers, make sure that you get the Ireland version of that layer. You also need to have the same architecture for your layers. So if your layers are built in with Graviton 2, your functions need to be with Graviton 2. Well, the other way around. If your functions are using Graviton 2, your layers need to be built with Graviton 2, and the same with x86. So that's something to have in mind. These zip packages also have different formats depending on your language. So I will show you all the demos as always with Node.js, but if you're using Python, you will need to follow different structures. I will leave you a link in the description box where you can find what are the paths for all the different supported runtimes. But when you are using Node.js, your Lambda layers need to follow the structure of Node.js / node modules. I will show you in the demos how this should look. And another thing to have in mind is that each Lambda function has a maximum of 5 layers that they can have. So it's not like all your dependencies will have their own exclusive layer. Maybe they don't, maybe they do. But if you have multiple dependencies and you want to manage them all together, you might need to wrap them all in one layer. Or as I will show you in the demo where we are building our own layer with our own code, I will put all the shared code in one layer. So that's how I do it. So have in mind that limitation and also the size of the upload of the Lambda function. I will leave you a link with all the limitations in the documentation so you can check it out and you can look it through more in detail. So if you like this video, give me a like. Give me a comment. You have questions on layer? Have you used them? Have you tried them? Do you have them in your application? Are you sharing code like that? Are you using it for your dependencies? And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? So let's go to the first part of our demo where I want to show you how is to work with a third-party dependency. You will find the code as always in GitHub, so there's the link that so you can check it out. But I want to show you that. So you have a third-party dependency, like in this case, I will be using UUID. I hope I say it right, but basically this library is a library I use a lot to generate unique identifiers for things like to put in my Dynamo table or things like that. So this is a demo that doesn't make much sense, but it's very handy because it shows you how you can do this as infrastructure as code. You can do this as well from the console. So the first thing is to create an empty project and add a template YAML. We are going to use SAM for this, so I'm going to create my resource and I will create the layer here. And you can see that the type is a layer version, and that's the type of the resource. And we will go more in the details when I show you the longer part of the demo, when we are building this for your own dependencies. Here then we have this content URI, and that's where the dependency will be, where the code will be. In our case, we will not have code because we are going to use UIID. So I will create a folder called UIID layer, and then and you can have this in the root as well. If you have a dot, you don't need to put your own folder. But here is the part that is very, very important for every Node project, is to have a Node.js folder. This is the documentation, how it works, because then this zip file will get extracted into the build part of your function where the dependencies are in Node.js. So now we have the Node.js folder, and then what we do is basically we need to initialize the Node project inside that Node.js folder. So npm init-yes, and we have a Node project. Now what I will do is install the dependency, the UUID, basically by running npm install UUID. You're laughing already about that. And this is what is in my package JSON. Now we have ready. This is a layer that has this dependency inside. We just SAM deploy it and we are ready to go. We can go and see how it looks in the AWS console, and you can start using it from your own projects. I will show you how to use it in a second. So after this is deployed, let's go to the console, and we can see there in the Lambda as service, there is the layer category, and we can see there the SAM layers UUID, and we can see that there's two versions. Yes, because I deployed once, remove everything, and deploy it again to show it to you. And you can download the layer from there. It will download you the zip with the package JSON and the Node modules folder and everything that is there. So that's good. And yeah, so this is the first demo on how you will do with third-party dependencies. But I want to show you a most interesting part, because I think working with your own code and using that as a dependency is something that we need to do a lot, and more when we are working with functions that are small, very small. So I will show you an example of a working example in a project that I have been working for a while now. You can see it in my event bridge demo. This is not an event bridge at all, so you don't need to know anything about that. But if you want to know how I built that, go and check that playlist. It's linked below. Where there is multiple Lambda functions that are kind of microservices in a way. And each Lambda function basically does the same thing over and over again. So each Lambda function basically applies something into Dynamo. In this case, for this particular demo, this is not relevant. It's using particle SQL. That is a way to do operations with SQL in Dynamo. If you want to know how to do that, you know what you need to do, give me a comment. And then another thing that every function does is to send a message to Event Bridge. So instead of having functions that are doing inside each of the functions having methods that are doing that, and repeat them and copy and paste them all around, I extract them into a layer. So let's go to the code and see how I do it. So here is the project that you need to clone, so you can have that and you can see all the instructions on how to deploy it and how to test it. It's all there. So now I have already cloning it, and I will just show you the layers part. As I said, if you want to see the whole thing, go and check the videos on how I build it. But here we have a similar thing that like we have in the previous example, where we have our layers. So we are using SAM, and we have a layers resource. Here we have the layer version and all the information. So here you can see the layer name. In this case is SAM event advanced. I forgot the D, a helper. So here are my helper methods. And these are basically helper methods that are used around different microservices. We can put license info. We can put which runtimes are compatible. We can put also the architecture that is compatible. I have not put it here, but you can. You can also, you need to put the content URI, that is where the code is based. And if you want to use the layer that is defined in the same template YAML, you just use the layers property, layer attribute in SAM inside a function, and then you pass the reference of the Lambda layers that you just created in the resource. If they are not in the same template YAML, what you will do is use also the layers attribute, and then you are going to pass the ARN of this layer. Each layer has their own Amazon resource name, ARN, that identifies. Have in mind that it needs to be in the same region and be built with the same architecture as your function. So basically now the layer will have access to exactly the same permissions that the Lambda function has, because the layer is going to be kind of merged together. It's a zip file that will get placed inside this function. So basically it's executing inside the function, so it has the permissions that the function has. So in this case, as I said, this is putting events in event bridge, and it's also doing operations with particle inside a DynamoDB table. So it has those permissions. I don't need to give the permissions exclusively to the layers. They get them from the function. So that's something important to have in mind when you're working with layers. So now we can see the code for the layer. So you can see in this project, I have a folder called helpers layer that is the same exact name that the code URI. And there we have the same format as we had for the third-party dependency, that it says Nodejs and the package JSON. And then we have a node modules. So inside the node modules now we have things that I cannot get from the internet. I cannot do npm install Dynamo handler or event handler. This is my own code. So I cannot use a package manager from Node to handle these dependencies. So here I need to write that code. So inside each of the node modules, again, I have another package JSON, and this package JSON will handle the dependencies if there is any of these particular pieces of code. There is no dependencies in this code. Well, there is the AWS SDK, sorry. So you will find it there. So each of these folders will have a package JSON, and inside of each package JSON, you will see the dependencies that each of these individual libraries that we are building will need. In this case, everybody needs the AWS SDK to do their own thing. So you need to install that, and you will see it in the package JSON. And then when you open the index.js, make sure that you name your libraries index.js. So then the require it's more straightforward. So index.js is the kind of entry point to your library. And there you will see the imports for the AWS SDK, and to use the client Dynamo, I'm using the latest version of the SDK. So you can go and check it. It's the version 3. Have you tried it? Let me know. And then I'm doing some imports with Dynamo, and then running this execute statement that basically applies this particle SQL query into Dynamo. We can get there in another video. And then if we go and see the event handler, it works very similar. It's just also importing into the package JSON, the AWS SDK, and then I'm just creating all the information to make an event. So how I use this? I already showed you how to configure the access to the layer inside the infrastructure of the function, basically by making a reference to that Lambda layer that we just created in the template. So then if I want to use that, I can go to the handler of my function, the app.js, in this case of the order manager. You will see this in all the functions because they are all the same. That's what I'm doing this layer. And you can see that in the top, instead of requiring AWS SDK or blah, 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 I'm requiring the name of the libraries that I built. So one was Dynamo Handler, the other one was Event Handler, and they are required. So no mention to layers whatsoever, no mention to anything. They are just as the name of the libraries as we created inside the Node.js Node modules folder. And then we can use it, like we will use any function, any method that is inside these modules. There's nothing weird you need to do. Whatever is in the event handler that is exported, you can use it. Whatever is in Dynamo Handler that is exported, you can use it. And you use it as you will use any method inside a module. Very simple, and it's very nice. And also this is cool because you could have like unit tests inside those layers, and you can test this code. You can also, now by using these layers, testing becomes a little bit more complicated. So if you want to know how to unit test your Lambda functions that are using layers, let me know. How to locally test those Lambda functions that are using layers, that's even more trickier. So let me know, but we can talk about that in different videos. But yeah, so this is how you will do the code of the layer. So what you can do now is do SAM deploy and deploy this to the cloud, and we see when it's deployed. So I can show you what it's there. So now it's deployed, and what we can do is to go to the Lambda service in the console and see the Lambda layers. And there we can see these SAM events advanced helpers. And you can see that there is 18 versions. Yes, I was iterating a lot on this layer because I was working on this. And you can see the description is what we put, the compatible runtimes is what we put, the license is what we put. And there you can see each of the individual layers. I can tell you a funny story about the download button because I was cleaning my computer the other day and I found out that I have 55 gigabytes of Node modules in my computer. So I was very smart and I ran a script that deleted all my Node modules. When I came to record this video, I noticed that my Lambda layers were kind of missing a part, the Node module part, because I deleted them. So luckily, I was able to download my previous deployed version of this layer and put them where they belong. So yes, when you download this, you get a lovely zip with whatever you deploy. So recommended if you remove your Node modules by any means. So yeah. So then if we go to the Lambda function, you can see what is going on. So let's look for the function, this order function that we were playing around. It's the same for all other functions in this project. And you can see now that there is a layer under there. So it says layer 1, we can have up to 5. And if you click there, it will take you to the layers, the version that is using, the runtime, the architecture, and the ARN for that particular version. So this is how you do it. So now you want to update the layer. You did a change and it's not inside the same project. It's a different project. So it's not like you're deploying the whole project. You're working like in the first example that was its own separated project. You deploy it, you get a new version. So what you need to do is to go with that ARN of the layer into your Lambda function and manually change it and redeploy the function. If you don't redeploy the function, it will always use the version that is set up in the ARN. So that's something important to have in mind. So when you're working with layers, it's not that you change the layer and magically everything changes around. You need to redeploy the layers. And that's meant for many reasons. First, because if you change critical parts of your code, you want to test it maybe before putting it in production. So it's a safe mechanism for you to make sure that everything is working and you have a moment to test. So yeah, so that's something to have in mind. Whenever you update the layer, the code that is using the layer doesn't get updated automatically. And also, if for any reason you're using a layer from a third party and they remove the layer, your code will still be working even if the layer is removed because it's in your function already. But you are not able to redeploy that function if the code is removed. So have that in mind if you're using third-party layers. And that was everything I want to share with you today. Let me know in the comments what else you want to know for layers. Answer all the questions I asked you in the video, and I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!